Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Takutai moana Natasha Kemp. Tōku ingoa, nā rauru Ngāti Tūwhare toa me nā iwi o mōkai pātia kei taihapi ahau. I always tell people I'm the very, very privileged and humbled CEO of Manurewa Marae. The best career move I ever made in my in my career of actually moving from mainstream healthcare into working at a marae, and the best decision I've ever made. And I guess when we think about advocacy, when we think about what we've done as a Whānau Ora network and how we worked over COVID in the last 2.5 years, the first thing I want to do is to be able to mihi to my kaimahi who frontlined in Manurewa, in Tāmaki, in the hardest time of our lockdown and pandemic. Without great kaimahi, without the support, without their courage to be able to frontline in a time where our community was in a state of disarray, our frontliners, our kaimahi, our whānau stood up, and they really did save lives. I want to mihi to John and his leadership around Whānau Ora Network and our Whānau Ora approach, and the way we stood up as Māori partners, as Māori leadership across the motu, but especially for those of us who are part of Te Paeherenga o Tāmaki, who are Māori partners and providers in Tāmaki, that stood to save lives, that really did put ourselves, not just our community at the forefront, but ourselves as whānau who had to get out there and just do the mahi. And I mihi to all our kaimahi that did that across Whānau Ora and across our kaimahi partners of Te Paeherenga o Tāmaki. Empowerment came in many ways, I think, for us as a marae. We were the first marae in the country to be able to provide vaccinations. We set up in 4 days to become a local vaccination centre. We had to be able to turn around the opportunity that we were given to be able to vaccinate our whānau at our marae and in our wharenui. We faced a lot of challenges as a marae, and our urban marae, I'll paint you a picture of Manurewa, 95,000 population Manurewa, 25,000 population Māori. A third of them are Ngāpuhi, the third is Tainui, the rest of us are all there. But we are a hugely densely urban Māori population, and a population of whānau who do not turn up for service, who did not want to be vaccinated. But we've vaccinated to date 62,000 whānau, and we were able to turn that around. Which is why I mihi to my kaimahi, because actually none of us knew how to be lay vaccinators. We turned a workforce around. We took the opportunity of COVID to just get out there and do it well. We are experts in our own community. We're the only marae in Manurewa. We're a large urban marae, and you just got to know your whānau well, and you've got to be able to empower them. People, when in Tāmaki we got given a whole lot of resource for COVID. Money was thrown at us by funders. But we still had to be accountable for that. But what we know well is, we know our community, we know our whānau. People looked at us and said, you're giving vouchers out to whānau, you're creating a dependent community. Look, let's face it, they were dependent before COVID. What our whānau needed, I'm going to sort this on my earring. Oh yeah, I'll take out the earring. So our community were already dependent, codependent, however you want to see it. I mean, if you know anything about Manurewa, you know already that, we have 2 MSD sites in our community. Our whānau already lining up a K down the road, just on a normal Monday to Friday, and that's without COVID. We have, we don't have any homes, we have high rents. The cost of living is huge in our community, and we're already in the negative. Our community always seen as being vulnerable, or some people look at us as, the poverty is there. But you know what? There's greatness in Manurewa, just like every other community. Manurewa has the largest rugby league club, the Marlins. We have top league sports players. We have Crystal Rota, who's the captain of the Kiwi Ferns. We've got Hilda Peters, who's sitting in there, who's a Kiwi Fern and was our site lead for our vaccination centre. So, we've got greatness amongst our people. We turned our greatness into great leaders to be able to fight the fight of COVID. People looked at our community and said to us, you're creating more dependency by giving out vouchers for vaccinations. Actually, we didn't see it as that. We saw it as actually, there's resource given to us, and we're going to give that resource back out to our whānau. And we all knew that there was a struggle. So we just had to use what we had to be able to encourage whānau, like our last panel said, of all walks of life. In Manirewa we say, our marae is your marae, and we're open to any community within our community of Manirewa. Yeah, we've done 62,000 vaccinations. I can tell you what, not all of them were from Manirewa. A lot of whānau saw the manaakitanga that the marae provided. When we opened up our gates to everyone and anyone, we get people from Orewa, we got people from West Auckland, we got people from outside of the South Auckland coverage area because they just wanted to be serviced. They just wanted to know that someone was going to awhi them. And if we were able to vaccinate, that was amazing. But our goal wasn't to actually vaccinate, our goal was to manaaki whānau. And my HR strategy of the time was, if you could say kia ora, all day, every day, even if you were having the shittiest day, you were on my team. Because actually, that's what our role was, to manaaki. And for a marae, we wanted to make sure that manaakitanga was at the forefront of everything that we did. That actually, we wanted to make sure it didn't matter who came into our gate, or who came to our shot cuz bus, or who came to the shot cuz camper, that they all felt like they had a great experience from Manirewa marae. And that's the way to turn around, I guess. Our whānau never came for health services anyway, but now they do. During this time, Manirewa has created a brand, a trusting brand where whānau trust our kaimahi, they trust the leadership, and they know if they come to Manirewa marae, they're going to be looked after. And that's what we did, and that's how we empowered our whānau during the time of COVID, when we were at the hardest times, of a period of time that was so hard for us in Tamaki Makaurau. But we were able to do that because Whānau Ora provided that space for us, because John Tamahere said to us, don't stand down. You're going to provide a response in Tamaki Makaurau, and we're not going to stand down, while everybody around us stayed home. Government departments weren't able to stand up. There was no one out there to help us, so we had to help our own, because that's what we should do, and that's how we did it in Manirewa. So a lot of whānau came to us during the time and said, how can we be like you in Manirewa? And I say, you just use what you have in your community. You've got experts. Your whānau know how to work through your community, turn it all around and make it, an opportunity of a lifetime for your whānau. And that's what we did in Manirewa. And there's many challenges, always, but you've just got to push through them. You've got to encourage whānau that everything's going to be okay. Find the resource for them. There's lots of resource out there for our whānau. COVID allowed us to see where those resources were, and allowed our kaimahi to be able to give those resources out to our whānau. And they connected and they activated in a way that in Manirewa we've never ever seen before. To the point now, on Saturday we ran an activation again, using the same knowledge, the same skill and expertise that we've used during COVID to bring whānau back to the marae now that we've got no restrictions. And you know what, I'm so proud of our marae. 1,000 whānau turned up just to Manirewa marae on Saturday. It's unheard of. Unheard of to bring whānau to your marae for health and well-being checks, for vaccinations if they still wanted to. We did over 100 vaccinations on Saturday. Unheard of. That's never happened. And we're continuing to drive, a well-being approach. And I guess that's because too, we work to the tungikura of Amohia ake te oro o te iwi, ka puta ki te whaiau. The health and well-being of our people was paramount. So we didn't have any challenges, because actually that's all I said to people. Amohia ake te oro o te iwi, ka puta ki te whaiau. You got any problems, you just need to think of that, and all those problems will disappear. You got to find a way. As a leader, we've got to remove barriers, and that's what we did at Manurewa Marae. But, you know, I can do that in my role because I have a great board, a great governance who allowed me and gave me the freedom to be able to meet the needs of our people. But in turn, John Tamahiri showed us that, the Waka board showed us that as well. The trust in our people is paramount. So kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Tash. Nau anō hoki I koro mai e pāna ki tēnei mea ara ko ngā agencies ki waenga I ngā hapori. We've seen models across Aotearoa which work effectively when we actually have the agencies sitting within our whānau and our communities. The way that COVID rolled out, as you've mentioned, is we took our maunga to our people. Hei oranga anō mō tātou. Nei rā te mihi kau atu ki a koe. Kei te hihia hau anai nei, te tuku atu te rākau ki tēnei o tātou nei māngai kōrero, ko iano hoki te CEO o te runanga o ngai tamawhariua. Ki a koe e te tuakana Valarie, I know you're nervous, but you've got so much to share.
Oh.
Kōrero mai.
Anxiety levels going through the roof right
I thought, well,
now.
if I put her a second, that way she can get it out. Because when you're last, you're like, really? Oh my God, what am I going to say?
Well,
so,
I might have gone last, and then everybody had already shared all the kōrero, eh?
You got some magic.
Kia ora koutou, ko Valarie tōku ingoa, ko te rere atu kahia te marae ko nau tamawhariua te hapu. I'm just a pepe in the game right now. I have also come from a sporting background in Australia and come home to awhi mai whānau at home at Te Rere Atu Kahia. I've been with our organisation now for 3 years, and I just feel so a baby in the game amongst this room, and what an absolute privilege and an honour to be sitting in a space where we advocate for our whānau. Like the Pou Matariki, amazing. We need to be fierce and we need to be penetrating wherever we go, because that's why we're in our spaces. That's why we do what we do for our whānau. And what really irks me, just like what Dr. Kiri was talking about today, and my knickers get in a twist when I hear it's happening all over the country. I don't care about the rest of the country. I only care about my rohe, what's happening in my space for my whānau. So, you know, that's why it's important that we be the matataki for our people and penetrate wherever we go. There is a real fine line for advocating, like was spoken earlier. You know, how Dr. Kiri talked about dodging the contracts to fit the purpose, our purposes. Our whānau dodgy their needs as well. So, you know, there's a fine line for advocating, us walking alongside them, us holding their hand, and when it's time to let go and let them walk alone in their journey. But we're always beside them, ready to step in and awhi them whenever's needed. At Te Rere Atu Kahia, we actually shut our pā down in COVID, and we put up a barrier and nobody was coming in, and only one whānau from each whare was to leave the pā, because we had too many vulnerable whānau in our community. So that was set up to protect our whānau, and then all of a sudden the community stepped in, and we had amazing support from everybody in our community. Like Manurewa, we're looked upon as well as vulnerable, poor, you know, they don't want to do anything with our people. Some of our whānau don't even have utilities, so imagine being in lockdown and you don't even have running water at your whare. You know, these are the sort of things that we had to deal with for our whānau in Katikati. So while we're talking about urban whānaus, we're talking about real rural communities that had absolutely nothing. And that's why people like us are in these positions because we need to penetrate everywhere and anything to get the resources for our people. I think that's me. I'd like to share. Kia ora koutou.
And there we have it, it's iwi. You just say it how it is, you say it from the heart, and it means a lot there too. He anō e te iwi, nei rā te mihi ki a koe, Valarie. When we speak about vulnerable whānau, we still have the kōrero out there actually. We've got our vulnerable whānau and those that are still at risk, who weren't happy with the government's decision to take away the mandates around mask wearing. Ka nui te aroha kia koutou, ka nui te aroha no hoki kia tātou. So hopefully we've still got these mechanisms in place to keep those of our vulnerable whānau still safe as we move forward. Ka tūkuna te rākau ki a koe, Chris. Nau anō hoki te wā e wā.
Tātou, ko Chris hau, ko Ngāti Kaununu tuku iwi, ko te tūmaka tupuna ora mā tātua. Look, I'm not going to probably say anything that you don't already know, but obviously the Whānau Ora response was the main reason why this country's response was the best in the world. The government hasn't really acknowledged that, and I don't think if it wasn't for Whānau Ora or Hau Ora providers, they wouldn't be able to claim the success they had. So when a couple of things that happened for us is that obviously when Jacinda jumped up on her 1 o'clock little talk that she gave, and we were hearing information for the first time, we just had to go, and a lot of us that didn't get contracts until about 4 to 6 weeks into the actual pandemic. And so that's quite a risk for an organisation that carries so many staff and so many overheads and so much infrastructure that you have to invest all that money to go. But you just have to go and wait for the contract to land later on. So I think we all managed that from across the whole sector. And yep, our boards were a bit nervous at times, seeing all the money going out and no money coming back in. But that's just the way we had to roll. A couple of other things that we had to do is all the staff just threw out their JDs, right? Didn't matter what you were before the pandemic, right? As soon as it was, go. If you had to drive, you had to do lunch, you had to vaccinate, you had to do whatever, that's what the team had to do, and that's quite cool, and that's quite humbling when the staff is just willing to go and do really, really long hours as well. In mā tātua, hugely rural, isolated townships, it takes 3 to 4 hours just to get to your location. Once you set up, you're doing 6 to 8 hours on the go, in a car park, in a rugby field, and then 4 hours to come back home. You think of all the kind of childcare arrangements that your staff have to put in, and all that kind of juggling, so when I think about advocacy, I think about whānau, but I sort of think about staff. Because if you're not doing both at the same time, it's a waste of time. And so investing in staff was a big thing that we had to do, and be super flexible, and just go with it. The other rule that we had, that any of our kaimahi, when they were in a meeting with any agency, they just had to say no. Had to say no all the time. Couldn't agree. They weren't allowed to agree to anything, because we knew that wasn't the way that was going to happen. There was 2 key things that changed our response across COVID, and the 2 barriers that they put up was infection control policy. Remember that one? You can't go mobile because of the infection control policy. They made us stay in those static, isolated, little bloody clinical, narrow things. We couldn't get out to the community, couldn't get out to the region, and so once our teams were able to negotiate that policy setting, wow, don't they love it now? Don't they love it now? And the second thing, when it came to vaccinations, again, the cold chain policy. Can't do cold chain going mobile, can't do cold chain going rural. And so once you negotiated that little speed bump, then bang, we're out there again. So there's always obstacles that they're putting up. Always obstacles that you have to, and they'll claim it though. They'll claim that they'll go mobile, they'll claim that they do the outreach, they claim that they do social investment now, even though we know it's Whānau Ora. So there's a thing that we have to recognise. We have to recognise what we've done, but we also have to recognise that we have to protect what we've done, because a lot of people are claiming what we've done, and a lot of people are now trying to take over what we're doing going forward. And so when you think about Wellington, you know, you think of your MSDs, you think of your oranga tamarikis, they're all claiming Whānau Ora, right? But they're not investing any funding in Whānau Ora. They're trying to give you their KPIs or their outputs so you can go and deliver it, and not give you any funding. So there's a bit of a fight, to be honest, down in Wellington. Is obviously the recession is, you know, close, or you know, inflation is increasing. Everyone's scrapping over money, and so, you know, when I think about advocacy, you know, I've just looked at Helen Lay right there, Amo Heidi here, Lady Mox in there, even John Tamihere when he was a young boy back in the day, that the original Whānau Ora cabinet paper that went up was over $1 billion. Nothing like what we see today. And so we have a real issue about managing expectation now, real issue, because our whānau say, hey, if you can go mobile and bring me vaccinations and all these wonderful, beautiful things out in Waimana or Ruatahuna, then next time you come back, make sure you bring X, Y, and Z, if you know what I mean. And so that's, and you think about capability and capacity issues, right? The investment, the planning, the training, the health and safety, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot that goes into that. But that's just from a back of house function. I'm talking about front of house in relation to, you know, our Whānau Ora, you know, navigators or kaimahi. They go into the homes or the communities, and they're able to develop plans. They're able to develop pathways. Most of the time, they don't have the money to implement it. So we're giving whānau sometimes this false illusion that whānau Ora go in, create a wonderful plan, create a wonderful pathway, and then we have to go back and hustle to bring that plan together by getting all these different contracts from whether we've got them or not, or from other providers, or find out who's got the contract. So you've got all those building blocks coming together so you can create that big plan. Okay, so we still got, you remember the analogy with 7 cars up the driveway? Still got 7 cars up the driveway. It's just that they're all coordinated, those 7 cars now. and so we need to take the next step. We need to take the next step and actually give our kaimahi the funding and investment to actually implement the plan as well. This has only been done once before, and some of you might know it through the Provincial Growth Fund, right? Provincial Growth Fund for He Pouta-Marangatahi, Te Aramahi, all those wonderful programs. Well, they threw money. They threw in money at, and the formula that was sitting in behind that was $10,000 a head. You could spend $10,000 per person. Right, imagine if our kaimahi got that for Whānau Ora, 10,000. Imagine the counselling, imagine all the kind of business development, all the mentoring, all the financial stuff, the housing, the education, you know, and you think of the economy of scale, right? You deal with 100 whānau, you've got 1 million straight away. You know, and just think about that kind of economy of scale and investment. So when I think about advocacy, I think about, you know, what's next. And yep, we have to acknowledge the awesome work that we've done. We have to protect what we've done, but, you know, what's next? What's next? Because our whānau have higher expectations now. Our kaimahi have higher expectations, and we've got to keep delivering against that. So anyway, thank you. I know it's almost lunchtime, so I'll finish. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Chris. Advocacy is a huge part of the mahi that we do, and as I've heard over the morning, ko tēnei mea rā, ko te mahi tahi, I'd actually go back and acknowledge Hariata, because one of the things that we did as Te Arawa, and as I've heard even talked about here when we look at Matariki, was for the first time in a long time for such a great kaupapa, Te Arawa worked together. Te Arawa, we united, and we were united not only in the haka space, but we were united to do a haka for the betterment of Te Arawa whānui. And so kai te mihi ahau kia koutou, ko koutou anō hoki I para I te huarahi, kia mahi tahi koutou. Finally, for this morning, kia koe te whanaunga Athena, ko ia anō hoki tō tātou nei CEO of Te Runanga o Tūranganui, Ākiwa.
Tēnā tātou. So I'm actually standing in for our CEO, Ronald Nepe, who couldn't be here today. But no tūranga rongo whakata nai tamanahini te aitanga mahaki o ke iwi. I suppose experience around advocacy is dealing with government departments and Gisborne District Council at the time, and with Amo Haere sitting on so many Zooms to fight for what we needed for our whānau. Dealing with whānau that don't understand the narrative around our whānau, who don't have much, and living in our rural communities, looking at the logistics on how that would get there. I suppose also CEs have discussed around thinking our kairahi, because without the machine, nothing actually happens. And it's those ones that we need to look after to instill and perform to support our communities and our hapori. In 2022, it was about standing up our pātaka within our communities. And I must onsell I Tū Whānau, because without I Tū Whānau, those communities wouldn't have been driven by what we had already established back in 2015. So there's Whānau Ora and there's I Tū Whānau, and we've put those two together. Reason being is because it's the whānau that drive what they want, and it's their voice that we carry to implement what they need. Kiri talked today about dodgy. We do creative. We find a creative solution that fits within those boundary boxes, but yeah, we're just good at doing it and finding the solutions. I suppose it's around also understanding that whānau are the leaders of their whānau, but it's also our kairahi are the leaders of those whānau. So if you can find that leader within that one whānau, then you are actually helping them to be empowered about what their choices are. Kairahi, you have to remind them, you are the leader for all those whānau. Am I? Yes, you are. Because they're looking at you for direction and understanding on the best way to get them where they need to be. Yes, they fall over, yes, they trip up, and that's okay. Just be there to help pick them up, to say, are you ready to go? Let's go. Some of our partners that we work with, whangaia, ngā pāharakeke, which is around the family, helping them to be a part of Whānau Ora with our police, and knowing that there's a better way of working forward together. Advocating for whānau, not telling whānau what to do. Our whānau have been let down so many times, as we all know, and we've seen over the last, 5-10 years with Whānau Ora, that there's opportunity to grow our whānau, our business, Whānau Ora, and also our hapori and our hapu and marae. Because without Whānau Ora, being in those areas is what instills us to be who we are. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Athena. We've actually got some pātai here. It is now pātai time. Yeah. If you are on your app and you want to ask any of our panellists anything, we don't have roving mics, make sure you put some pātai up here. So we've got the first one here. Why do you think matataki is important for Māori health? Kei a wai tērā.
Yeah, I'll jump on that one. I'll give a real tangible example. When Lady Moxon and I were on the interim board for a little bit, there was a piece of research commissioned of all the 29 billion spent in health.
Yep.
How much of that money actually solves health problems?
Yep.
Right, and we won't do a snap poll right now, but the number came back was 20%. 20%, and so the 80-20 rule is that that 28 to 29 billion will only solve 20% of health problems. The research found out that the other 80% will be solved by other sectors in other areas like Whānau Ora, right, like housing, right, oranga tamariki. That's where in the context of health. And so in the interim plan that's coming out soon, one of the key priorities is the connection between health and other agencies to make sure those outcomes are achieved. So I guess that's an invitation to us all that there's going to be a bit of an opportunity for everyone to be able to go into health and help solve that other 80% in relation to all, and we already know it. We come across it in relation to all our plans that we're doing, and so from the health sector point of view, that's part of their upcoming strategy, is to really reach out beyond the 20% that they can control and sort out the other 80%.
Tēnā koe, Chris. Another part I hear, this one's for all of the panellists, so any one of you can choose to answer this. What is the next wero for your organisation or collective in your rohe in this next chapter of the Whānau Ora kaupapa?
Oh, okay. I'll speak to that. So I suppose for Tūranga Nui a Kiwa is around establishing home ownership for our whānau, dealing with emergency housing urban development. We have a 3-year plan to be able to empower our whānau to have a better understanding of what it looks like to own or care for a property, or how do you talk to banks, what does a mortgage broker look like, what's our savings looking like. I will never ever get there, but also working with other partners like iwi Build around Tūranga. So for us it's about looking forward, setting up those goals along the way and making it achievable to make sure we are here to set our whānau to be successful.
Tēnā koe, Athena, ka pai tērā. He pātai anō. Māori have a long and proud tradition of matariki. What does this mean for you and your work with whānau? Kei a wai tērā whakautu.
I'll answer that one. What does that mean to me? That puts me in a really good position for my whānau to be able to fight for them, to be able to be sitting at the table and advocating in any space. It's important. Matariki is so important that we continue to do what our ancestors done. It's really important.
Tēnā koe. Ka pai. Anyone else like to speak to that one?
When I think about it, I think at a whānau roots level, it's about encouraging our whānau to have hope, that there is a brighter future, and that we need to keep pushing and driving and striving to be the best versions of ourselves. I think that we've got to do that at the next level with our kaimahi. And we've got to turn the workforce development that we achieved during COVID and actually really push it in this next phase. Actually, all those lay vaccinators, they need to be vaccinating more than just COVID. They've got to do flu, they've got to do MMR. We've got to release the policies that are surrounding those clinical, the 5%, and moving them to be more 95%. But we need the likes of Dr. Chris to be able to help and advocate in a way, and all of our other clinicians out there to help, push our non-clinical workforce, and that will help move us into the next phase and next part of Whānau Ora. We need to keep the rangatahi workforce going, and we need to be able to skill them to be able to continue to drive Whānau Ora. I think also that, when we think about what we've achieved recently in Whānau Ora, we've been able to mobilise as a people, mobilise as a community. We need to continue that mobilisation. We're currently in a period where whānau are asking for change. They want to see more leadership. They want to see our people browning up these local board tables. They want to see our people in decision-making seats. So we've got to move that to the next phase. And some of us are in key roles to be able to do that. So we need to start stepping up, and be fierce and be have the courage to stand in those mainstream spaces, but which we can actually take and populate and take over. When I think about Matariki, we only have 8 seats available on our local board, but there's 29 candidates. But actually you've got to really push as Māori, and we're really spoilt at the moment for Matariki. There are a lot of Māori candidates standing and they're all great. you know, and that's good for our people. So we want to take those spaces. Actually, I want to brown up Mani Rewa. I want the Māori outcomes money, you know, to be there for Māori, for our community. But then on the next level, we need to, we're going into government election next year. We need to move Whānau Ora to leverage our getting our to Pāti Māori, I'm just saying, you know, into those seats. But no, it's not that, it's just standing up, advocating for our people. Our people are asking for change, so we need to stand and be able to take those seats. So I see there's a huge political drive for us as Whānau Ora to move into the next phase.
Tēnā koe, me mihi ka tika moera whakautu. This is one that's for all of our panellists, so I would actually like each of you to talk about this. Some of you have touched on it already. However, what are some of the positive outcomes, learnings and benefits that have come out of COVID? And I did hear somebody earlier mention the emergency housing, as it well may be a way forward, but kei koutou tērā, I'll allow each of you to give a whakaaro on that. What are some of the positive outcomes, learnings, benefits that came out of COVID?
I suppose COVID has been a bit of a positive for all of us because it's actually brought us more together. Hapori, marae, departments, MSD have actually come to us on how to implement or how do we do what we need to do. Probably being very grateful to be marae connected and having relationships with many others, we were able to do that very easily. It's just like going into a kitchen, rolling out dishes, rolling out kai. We kind of had a flow of how it would work in our minds, and then we could make it happen. So I think for COVID, it's actually brought us closer together. Health is paying more attention to us. MSD is trying to get there to understand how we work. You can't do that. Yes, we can. Councils understanding that, well, we should do it this way. Well, no, we're going to do it this way. So we actually have a true voice at those tables. So I suppose for us, is COVID has actually been a positive space.
Kia ora.
For me, very similar. It was the positives for that was that it brought our whole community together, Pākehā and Māori. We were forced to work together for the common cause, and very similar. Now our government, local government agencies want us at the table because they've realised we're the ones with the relationships on the ground. So that's one of the main positives for us.
I think firstly for Mani Rewa, we've created a brand. We've increased our reputation of who we are, and that we've shown we've been able to demonstrate that actually marae can do this, and that we are a response, and that we know our community well, and we know how to serve our people. I think for myself, I've become a better leader for it. I really had to get in the forefront and be a frontliner. And if I said that I wanted my staff to stand out in the cold, then I had to stand out in the cold with them. Actually, one reminded me today, remember when they tried to run you over? I remember, you know? And, but I was there with my kaimahi. You know, I took the abuse too. You know, I took the abuse, and so far that I ended up on the 6 o'clock news. And, but those are the things we do in these leadership roles. I think there were huge opportunities for us to mobilise and leverage off Whānau Ora. I think it showed Aotearoa that we know our people, we know how to serve our community, and Mani Rewa's been has taken those opportunities to its highest, and we have become a hub. We've become a place where government agencies want to come to Mani Rewa Marae, and they want to sit in my whare, and they want to provide service on our marae, because no longer do we want whānau lining up down the road on the streets of Mani Rewa. They're now bringing resource to the marae. They're saying, we've got this. I say, thank you. Now give it to our whānau, and that's the job of our kaiarahi and our kaimahi, to get that resource to our whānau, to those that need it the most. Kia ora.
For me, I think when it came to the World Hauora Olympics, we got the gold medal, and our providers still hold the world record. And I think for me that just said that, or reinforced the fact that we just got to back ourselves. in any kind of situation, and move as one, because time and time again agencies or government pack us off, when we're acting alone, but we moved together during the pandemic, and so it was much harder, and so being able to be a part of that and see our success, and actually people get out of the way because they know what we were doing was better than what they were doing. And I think we've just got to make a decision amongst ourselves in relation, okay, what's next? And how we move as one towards that particular goal.
Yeah. Tapai, thank you to our panel. We've got a few more questions, which is brilliant. Everyone's on a roll now. We've got the questions coming through thick and fast. So you can see these questions. They are on your app. They're right in front of you too, so you can see some of the questions that have already been posed. But I actually want to pick up on one of those ones where you nearly got run over. Well, I was one of those faces that was on one of our Waipareira Trust Fight for Your Whakapapa. It was lots of fun. Yes, it was. I was so sad that they all had to get taken down because of all the abuse we got here. But remember, I said earlier something around whakapapa Māori does not equal whakaaro Māori, and I think that's where some of our Māori whānau, because we were getting bombasted by our own here. So interesting how even that kōrero was quite challenging. And it was like, nah, leave them up. I really love them up there because, if it's creating conversation, it's the kōrero that end up transpiring to, oh, well, if Auntie Mercer's up there and she's there with Te Manaia, it must be something that I might want to go and do. That was last year. We're now talking about this year and celebrating a lot of the things that our kaimahi have been on the floor doing. So the question here is actually around our kaimahi. Our kaimahi are our community. A lot of support needed for all. Any experience around how this was managed in respective organisations? Kei a wai te tehi kōrero e pāna ki tērā.
Manu rewa.
Paper, scissors, rock.
You're right. Our workforce are our community, and when we needed a recruit, the first people I went to was at my local community, and you tap people away. I didn't have a HR policy, I pushed that aside, and I just said, find me the best whānau that are in our community, and I want them to come and work at our marae. And along the way we met people and we built relationships with people, and one of the gifts I have is seeing potential in whānau and in people. And I've always said that I want to have the best people at our marae. So I want what they have to be able to give back to our people and give back to our community. And we've worked hard at that at Manirewa. We removed barriers so that, it wasn't about the ones that had the flashes CVs. Actually, I don't read any CVs, because anybody can write one of those. And I actually sit down and have a kōrero. Actually, I like meeting people like this and just having the kōrero, and then just working out, oh yeah, you've got something I want. And that's how I created a great workforce at Manirewa Marae, because honestly, we could not do what we did at Manirewa, 62,000 vaccinations, without great kaimahi. And they're local people that know our community, that live up and down and out and around, and they know people who knew people, and that was exactly how we built and grew our workforce at Manirewa Marae. We run a tight ship team. I'm an open book kind of CEO. I say, okay, we all come to the table. My leadership team's made up of almost like 15 people, because every one of them have a gift, and I need every one of their gifts to be able to meet the need of whānau and Manirewa. And COVID has, what we saw in COVID, everything heightened, and it hasn't gone down. If you come to Manirewa, it's busier than ever now. I mean, our food bank, we were never a food bank. We're a blingin' food bank now, and it's not going to go anywhere. And our wharekai, which can seat 200 whānau, is now full and jammed with kai, has become a distribution hub. And you need kaimahi to do that. So I think it's just being able to know your community well, having open and honest conversation, and we will continue at Manirua Marae to recruit like that and continue to grow a workforce, a young workforce that's unapologetic. I don't know if you've seen lately, if you watch our posts, we've got all these rangatahi. And you know what? Majority of them are fluent reo speakers. And that's really awesome. We want to grow that within our community.
Tēnā koe, nei rā te mihi mo tēnā whakautu. We are getting closer to shifting resources closer to whānau self-directed funding, but it's not yet been mentioned here today. There are strong examples of this providing mana motuhake already. Is there a reason why this has not been talked about, or have we got another whakaaro from our panel this morning? Afternoon.
Yeah, I'll jump into that. God, one of the biggest challenges we have is whānau tahi and the client management system. Yeah, that end. And look, it's not just whānau tahi, right? If you have more than a dozen contracts, the chances are you have at least 6 client management systems that you're having to deal with. And they're not talking to one another. They've all got their own little KPIs or their outputs, and so, and your staff, it shapes their behaviour, right? Because they know they have to report on this particular KPI, and so they shape and frame their behaviour around meeting that KPI. But that KPI doesn't line up with what they want to do with the whānau, right? Because the Whānau Ora plan is completely different. And so, we need to come up with a way, we need to come up with a system that allows us to have one plan, one household, right? One plan, one household that is able to coordinate all the services, all the well-being, all the care in that one system. No matter what agency you're working with or where you're getting the money from or whatever, just one unified system. And I think until we get there, that's always going to be an obstacle for us. It's always going to be something that's going to hold, that has been holding us back and still holds us back. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Chris. Yes. Paki mai. We've got time for a couple more pātai, and you can also, if you're a provider or another member of one of our entities here, and you have answers to the questions that are on the app, o whakaaro anō hoki, kia kaha te whakautu koa. Alrighty, I'm going to go to this one here. Whānau Ora is hard. We are trying to protect our whenua, our awa, our whakapapa. However, government want us to sit at the table around COVID, but at the same time, they are still doing things to our whenua, our awa, and our whakapapa. He whakaaro?
So, example is Tairawhiti Māori Wards, I'm a candidate. So we want to be able to have the right people sitting at those tables to support and kōrero and have the true voice amongst that governance group that actually is around the infrastructure. But also it's understanding that people are the infrastructure of Te Tairawhiti or any region that you live in. So I suppose it's instilling that within our whānau. And also when you're talking about voting, encouraging our whānau to be on the general role or the Māori role, however that rolls for them. But allowing them to have that power to make a choice, to have a kōrero and put their foot forward around poti.
Ka pai. My note on here was be informed, vote local. Ka pai tira. He whakaaro anō e pāna ki tira? Ka? Kei te pai. Haere tonu, ko tēnei pātai, or maybe we will have time for more. Okay, here we are. Health providers Whānau Ora Hapu Iwi Marae Hapori came together in a special rhythm during COVID vaccination and SIQ response Whānau Focus. How do we keep this kotahitanga through IMPB, Iwi Māori Partnership Boards and locality developments?
Good question. Good question.
Go!
Oh, it's gone. Oh. Good question.
So, okay. So look, I mean, it was a unique time, right? And if we could go back, I mean, the silver lining was the fact that all that bureaucracy just disappeared, right? And we were able to get in and work together from a united point of view. And unfortunately, pretty much after the lockdowns finished, all that patch protection came back within almost days or weeks, if you know what I mean. And you know, that was a bit unfortunate. You know, at the end of the day, we just have to recognise there's a richness in the way that Māori katoa organise themselves, right? Because our whānau, they access services through iwi door, hapu door, marae door, Whānau Ora door, mātāwaka door, whatever door, right? And we have to be flexible and agile to that. And you know, not have some kind of fundamentalism that only you should only go through that one door. And I think it's really upon us providers to come together, right, and make it easy for whānau, right, to go through, you know. And it annoys me a little bit because some agencies are using Whānau Ora lingo now, like, you know, no one door is the wrong door, if you know what I mean. God, if they said that 5 years ago, whatever. And so, you know, I think it's up to us to make sure that we are unified in how we work together. And I'm not talking about subcontracting, you know, tuakana teina, no, right? Everybody is equal. Right, and so we've really got to put skin in the game and put equity at a governance level and come together and work like that.
I was going to add, I think the first thing we need to do is agree, you know, because we can't even, some of us are already struggling in those relationships now, and that we are struggling to have a voice for, when I think about tamaki, iwi, mātāwaka, you know, who's who has the balance of power. We've got to be able to, what did Kiri say, put the egos aside so that we can continue to do the mahi. It's not easy, sometimes we're our own worst enemy, but we have to be able to continue to do. COVID showed us we can do it, we've just got to keep going.
And for me, I think that forums like this keeps the kotahitanga a space to share with different providers at different levels, because walking away from a space like this, you get some little gold nuggets and you can take them back into your space and implement those nuggets into your spaces. So spaces like these need to happen more often.
Lots of cameras around today. Here we are. I really want to pick up on something because last year at Tūhono, I might have mentioned, and I think I did mention, that for the first time in history, I honestly thought as a mama, he wahine Māori, that I was finally going to be coming through a time in my life where for the very first time in history, Aotearoa, irrespective of what party policy you might have had at the time, actually united. I was actually in that moment of hope for about 48 hours because we had a government that actually were on the same page. For less than 48 hours actually. But in saying that, that did provide us with hope, and earlier today we heard about the dreams and aspirations and the hope that our people still have of working together, united together. All of this kōrero that I'm hearing from our panellists today are also resounding within me, the hope that one day we will have a government that will work for the betterment of all. And I would like to, on that note, also acknowledge our ministers who have made it here today, or members of Parliament who have been amongst us today, who are listening to the kōrero. Because this is actually the first time, as I look around, that I see the people who are on the floor, who are beating the feet, who are working with our communities, our iwi, our hapu, our whānau, during the most extraordinary time of our history. No longer do we have a legacy that reminds me of our whānau that died from the Spanish flu, of which I've also spoken about over the last 2 years up at Puhirua, our urupa, Rangiwewahi, We have a place there. It's an unmarked place. But I always grew up knowing, be careful, darling, don't walk over that part, because that is where our whānau died. Or what did they die of? Oh, they died of the mate, the mate nui. But we don't necessarily hear about that because these are things that my nana and koro spoke about. However, each of us will have stories that remind us of a time and a place where our whānau, our tupuna, lost their loved ones. So, kei runga i te rao ngā koro, paki mai mo te hunga ora, tēnei hunga kai muri au.